I am paging Dr. Shanta.
I am the
doctor.
And I'm a licensed clinical psychologist.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Paging Dr. Shanta podcast, all things related to the Black culture.
The doctor in front of your name.
Hey, what's up, y'all? We are now tuned into the Paging Dr. Shanta show, where we talk about all things related to faith, mental health, and the culture. I am here with none other than my good sis, Sharon Alise. Which one do you prefer? Like, you want us to call you Sharon? Do you want us to call you Alise? Like, what?
We can stick with Alise.
Alise is good. Okay,
yes.
I love that name. So tell us a bit about yourself. Tell us about you, who you are.
Yeah. So I am Sharon Alise Moore.
Period.
I am a social worker therapist. I am focusing on mental health in ministry families, but also within creative. So I also have a background in singing. I have toured. I have been in a lot of creative and artistic spaces. And so that is extremely dear to my heart. But I'm also a PK. And so both of those worlds have collided. And I see how we really just need somebody to talk to.
For those who are watching who don't know what a PK is, can you describe that?
Yes, a PK is a pastor's kid or a preacher's kid.
Yeah.
But I'm a pastor's kid. It's a little different.
It's different.
It's deeper.
Yes, yes. And you know, I'm a PK too. That's how we
Yes.
like connected, right?
Absolutely.
Years ago at the Young Leaders Conference, like watching you and your family who are amazing people and your passion for ministry, like that was just amazing to see.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course, of course. I'm wondering though, for you, Sharon, like for those who, Alise, I'm sorry, for those of you who might not know the background, what exactly are who are some artists that you toured with? Like, if you don't mind.
So
talking.
I was able to tour with PJ Morton.
Period.
Yes.
You know, I was telling everybody that my friend was on tour with PJ Morton. That's her, Alise.
Period. So yes, I was able to do some things with him. I was able to do things with a few other artists, but
Dope.
touring wise, it was with PJ.
Nice.
Yeah.
How was that?
It was so good.
Oh
You know,
my
it was just a
gosh.
bunch of church kids just
I love
spreading the
that.
love of Jesus.
I
That's
love
really all
that.
it was.
We're literally all over though.
No, seriously.
Church kids, like
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
So in terms of like you touring and getting out there, singing background on this like world tour, you were also in school
I was also in school.
at the Howard University.
The illustrious.
How did you balance that?
So thankfully, most of the tour was over the summer, but it did bleed over into like my fall semester, and that was challenging.
Okay.
It was definitely challenging. Was in school internship, you know how this goes, as well as doing dates here and there.
Yeah.
But while it was challenging, it was like the best of both worlds because I was able to do both things that I wanted. So I was able to like scratch that creative music itch, but also pursuing and being able to talk about and work with like people in the mental health space.
Wow.
And so it was fun being able to see while I'm on the road, seeing some of the things that I was also studying and how it was all coming together. So yeah.
That's so rewarding to be able to take your passion and to merge that with your profession.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. Can you tell us about that journey of how you were able to combine the two?
So I've been singing. Now, are you saying, say that again, rephrase that
So
question.
combining your profession with your passion, right? Because a lot of people, especially in our profession, like therapists, we find that we have to stick to one thing. So I'm working with this population, I work at this hospital, what have you. They don't always know how to incorporate creativity with that. So like, how did you learn to like incorporate the two?
Okay, thank you. So the truth is, I've been singing since I was 5. So the creative side was always there.
Yeah.
Right? When I got in high school, once I started seeing things a little bit more behind the scenes, I was opened up and more exposed to, mental health. What is mental health? Why don't I know as much about it? And so when I would say my sophomore year in college, I really realized that I needed to take a step forward, like with the mental health part, right? I saw just how lacking it was in my community, but I also knew I could not let go of what I was already passionate about.
Wow.
And so for me, I had to make a decision like, all right, I don't know how I'm going to combine the two, but they're going to have to come together.
For sure.
And if there is a way that I can heal people musically and in church, on stages, on whatever, in whatever platforms that looks like.
The doctor in front of your name. The doctor in front of your name.
So we are back on the Paging Dr. Shonda show. I am here with my good sis, Alise, the singing therapist, right? That's what you said. The singing therapist. Come on here, singing therapist. So I want us to get more into like your background.
Okay.
So we talked about how a part of your inspiration was like that faith-based background, being a PK, and basically being around ministry families. You have a passion for that, right? Where did that passion come from?
Well, I mean, I didn't have a choice. I was born into it.
Right.
And so my dad is a pastor. My grandparents on both sides were pastors. My brother is a pastor.
Okay.
When I tell you, I come from a whole line of them. So I really didn't have a choice. It wasn't like, oh, I get to choose to who I want to be around.
Yeah.
And the thing was, I love and loved it. Like, I love what I come from. I really appreciate it. It did so much for me. It really opened my eyes to a lot. But also, it was because I was so in the world. I got to see so much behind the scenes, so much that people in the pews don't really get to see. And that's not all bad,
Right.
but it's honest. And and so that in itself opened my eyes to like, okay, we need some outlets here.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about, and I remember we were having a good conversation at dinner one day about how a lot of ministry families need healing.
Oh my God.
We need to walk through that process ourselves. Like, can you take us through that, like your thought process behind that and the work that you want to do in that area?
Well, I would say we see this, especially us, and I think that the world sees it as well, but pastors have been historically put on a pedestal.
For sure.
Right? Most of the times, it's the people who put them on this pedestal, but also sometimes pastors put themselves on it as well. Or they'll lean into the pedestal that the people put them on, right? And because of that pedestal, because of that greatness, they have a really hard time with being able to just be vulnerable in their humanity. One, because of what they represent does not necessarily glorify or endorse the human part, right? It does not really allow that human part. And so they have to stay on this pedestal, efforts to try to stay on this pedestal in order to convince people that this rawness, that this raw man, this raw woman does not really exist. And they kind of get stuck in this role. It's like role lock, as you would know about.
Wow.
And so with that, because they get so locked in, they're unable to really express or heal or address the human parts of them. And so I have just seen that lock and what that lock does to not only the human, but to the soul and to the mental health of these people. They're great people. They're amazing people. But they get locked in this role.
I'm literally getting chills with you like talking about this because it's so real right now. Okay. Role lock. Explain that for us. I've never heard that term.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So one of the things for group therapy, one of the things that we talk about within family systems is we have a thing called role lock and we have a thing called role suction. Every person in a family, in a unit, and it's not just families, but this can go into any group setting, every person assumes a role. So if your role in the family is the mediator, or if your role in the family is the problem child, because the rest of the family or the rest of the unit has gotten accustomed to you being in this role, they don't know what to do when you start stepping out of it.
Wow.
And so you kind of get locked in this narrative. So the moment sometimes, not all the time, but a lot of times when people start trying to step outside of the role that they have assumed, they get sucked back into this role because that's what people are comfortable with.
Wow.
That's what the people around them are accustomed to. So you get locked into a role and you get sucked back into it.
So what we're saying is that oftentimes this can happen even in ministry.
Even in ministry.
Wow.
So if you have been placed on a pedestal and that is the role that you have assumed, you are locked into this placement and you're fearful of stepping out off of it. And people, even though they criticize you being on a pedestal, they don't necessarily know what to do with you when you're no longer on it.
Wow. So almost like they have themselves kind of locked in this role, but also the people around them have them
and so
locked.
the role lock is generally, it's associated with other people doing it.
Got you.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. Okay. So I was just having this conversation with a friend of mine about how like this perceived image that people have of themselves versus the real image of themselves, when it gets into conflict with one another, like that in itself can create like internal turmoil, if you will.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How can that manifest even when we're talking about ministry, like people, like pastors and people who are on these platforms?
Well, what I've seen is, like I said, there is this battle with humanity and this battle with just realness and authenticity.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, the pedestal doesn't always look that bad at first, right? When a young minister is rising in the ranks and they see this pedestal that the audience, that the crowd is wanting to put them on, it actually kind of looks glamorous. It actually looks really appealing. And so sometimes they're guilty of kind of just going with the crowd, going with the drift. And they end up getting to this place. But somewhere along the journey on that pedestal, they realize that it's generally not that good. It's not that glamorous. It's not that comfortable. It's not really sustainable. And so they start having this, like you said, this kind of this identity shifting and realization and understanding of who they actually are.
Yeah.
But there's this fear of, well, how do I maintain what other people are wanting from me while also exploring who I think I'm turning into? Or who I'm becoming, or who I've never allowed myself to be.
Wow. Alise, you are spitting so many facts today. Like the simple fact that we're highlighting the impact of this underdeveloped identity of pastors and leadership.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you can talk more about how that impacts their overall mental health. Like, what does that look like?
Absolutely. So if we are going towards the pedestal, underdeveloped, character is possibly not fully developed. Once we get to this, what we consider destination, we are likely to fall a little quicker. We are more likely, you're more prone to fall off, to stumble off, and it more than likely being not just like a trip that people don't see, but something that everyone gets to see. And so when you not stumble off or just kind of like trip a little bit, but you completely fall off this pedestal, you are dealing with possibly some embarrassment,
Wow.
a lot of shame, some guilt. You are reminded of the fact, you're reminded of the things that you weren't conscious of when you were skipping the steps.
Yeah.
So now you are feeling guilty because, well, dang, I didn't take care of what I needed to take care of before I got here. Or I never avoided the pedestal to begin with. The pedestal was so attractive and I allowed them to put me up here. And so now like I said, we're dealing with embarrassment, we're dealing with shame, we're dealing with guilt. We are seeing the results of depression coming in aggressively. We are seeing depression develops and it can turn into a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I'm not even going to say what all it'll turn into because we see it turning into so many different things for different people. Yeah. But how many pastors have committed suicide at young ages? We don't hear about a lot of pastors committing suicide at 75.
Right.
We hear a lot of pastors committing suicide in their 30s.
Yes.
Early 40s, maybe late 20s.
Oh my goodness.
And so you get knocked off this pedestal possibly because of the underdevelopment of identity and character, and you start developing all of these symptoms of mental health, like I said, the depression, the low self-esteem, the uncertainty, the shame, all of these things, these attachments are coming to us, or we are becoming attached to so many different things. And we have a harder time getting back. I don't want to say getting back on track because possibly there was never a right track or a solid track that we were on to begin with. But we have a hard time getting back to the focus of things.
Wow.
And back to the center of ourselves.
So, okay, let's say a pastor does they experience the shame, embarrassment. They exhibit the depressive symptoms. The church doesn't notice it.
The church doesn't notice it.
Why is that?
Well, the pedestal is to protect them. And the pedestal that the people created is also to protect them.
Wow.
As much as people say they want honesty and realness and truth, they don't really, are they able to handle it? No. So the pedestal, I mean, it's twofold, right? The pastors, they allow themselves to go up there, but it was created by the people. The people needed a sacred place to put these humans to make them look more like God.
Wow.
So if I can decorate you, If I can, this is the whole going back to the temple, right? If I can decorate you, if I can make you look beautiful, if I can make you glamorous, if I can make you look royal, you look better than me. You look further or closer to God than me. And I need that for myself to have some sense of hope. And so the pedestal is presented, it's created, this shrine of sorts is created from us.
Yeah.
From the sheep, from the congregation.
That sounds like idolatry.
It's idolatry, right? And like I said, the pedestal is beautiful.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous. It's flowers.
Yeah.
It's purple. We have the royalty.
Right.
We have the diamonds and the rubies and all of these things. We have the gorgeous glasses that we drink out of and the throne chairs. It's absolutely fabulous.
Right.
And so who doesn't want to go closer to that? And so it's almost a dialectic of sorts.
Yeah.
Right? The truth is, it's beautiful, but the truth is, it's also detrimental.
Beautiful and detrimental.
It's dangerous.
Yeah. So like when we think about like the detriment of the glorification of this altar, this pedestal that we're putting pastors on, let's say a pastor falls. They do something that, is deemed as like controversial or whatever.
Uh-huh.
What does that do to the people? I know we're talking about like the pastor, how it impacts their identity, but how does that impact the people and their perceived image of that pastor?
Unfortunately, the people never go back to themselves and realize that they did this to themselves they did this to the leader. That's the part I don't like. That's the unfortunate part. What really happens is the people are disappointed and they're so hurt because there was this generational responsibility that was put on these pastors that you were supposed to uphold the standard. Now, what is the standard? That depends on your church.
Right.
That depends on your denomination, right? But you were supposed to uphold some kind of standard. You were supposed to be God in the flesh. You were supposed to be another coming of Jesus, baby Jesus. And so there is hurt, there's disappointment, and then the congregation gets to adopt. They have the opportunity to adopt this thing that we know as church hurt. Where they are now, because they are so let down by this man being a man or this woman being a woman, because they're so offended at another human being experiencing humanity, they are now allowed to walk away and say, well, I'm hurt. I'm hurt with the church. The church is a disappointment. And with that, I don't even know about this God thing.
Here's the thing, though, Alise. I often hear people talking about, like you said, church hurt. And it often is, sometimes it is related to our own pedestal, like that, making someone an idol, putting them in the place of a God, when in fact, only God should be God. Like,
absolutely.
And that impacts the relationship and how we see God.
As much as we say that, oh, I have a relationship with God, I talk to him whenever I want to, we still hold to this very old religious expectation that we are supposed to go to the man of God or the priest or the pastor to get to God. So which one is it? Do we go to God for ourselves and do we get what we need? Or do we still look at this man who was ordained to lead us as the voice of God?
Wow.
Or only the voice of God. And they can be a voice for God. But are they the voice of God?
And so how does one differentiate between like learning the voice of God and also learning that a man is a man and just that? While you can have the voice of God and have your ear close to the mouth of God, it doesn't mean that you're God.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and we're getting very spiritual here.
We are.
Which I love it, though. I love it. Sometimes we got to get there. But the truth is, if any character that we look at in the Bible, the closest ones that we deemed to God, they all had really big shortcomings. And I mean,
Facts.
You can argue different people of like how the people responded if they fail or if they messed up. But also the overall narrative was they were still God's choice. And so regardless of how they hurt you or disappointed you, your disappointment does not negate the fact that this is God's choice.
Say that again. Hold on. That just blew me a little bit. Hold on. Say that again.
Just because you are disappointed, and sometimes we do have a right to be disappointed, right? I don't want to dismiss the human emotions and the responses and reactions that we have, right? But your disappointment does not cancel out the fact that God chose this person.
The doctor in front of your name. The doctor in front of your name.
We are back with Alise Moore, the singing therapist. And you literally are like snatching our edges today because you are giving us the rundown of what it's like a lot of times for these pastors and young leadership finding their identity and even the disappointment that we can experience when we see them being human.
Yeah.
I want us to talk a bit more about how we can start to recognize the mental health symptoms of some of these pastors who are serving in leadership.
Okay, so I don't think there is a one answer for all. A lot of times it's really hard to, especially as the congregation, to recognize these symptoms because one of the first things that preachers learn to do is mask. And so it's not always hard to identify. I will say this is for the preacher or for the pastor. When the pedestal starts feeling comfortable, you are in trouble. If you get comfortable in your throne, in your seat, you need to take a step back. I'm not saying don't pastor anymore. You need to take a step back and examine yourself.
Wow.
Examine your heart, examine your mind.
Wow.
Families who are close to these pastors, well, obviously you're close to these pastors, your family. When conversations exclude anything but church, anything but the family business, you need to start having conversations checking in on how they actually are doing.
No, that's good. I 100% agree. Can you explain why that is a symptom?
Because you are becoming overconsumed with one portion of life that is not necessarily who you are.
Yeah.
You are a pastor, but you are not a pastor. You are, insert your name. You are that. You are a father. You are a husband. You are a friend. You are a sister. You are a brother. You are whatever you are. You are a creative. You are an artist. You are kind. You are compassionate. You are so many things. You are not a pastor. And so if your conversation is only pastor, then you are neglecting you. You are neglecting your heart. And that's a sign right there.
Come on. I see all the pastors right now in the room. Pastor Eric, you all right? You okay?
They're going to hate me. They're like, what you mean I can't talk about church business on Monday night at 7 p.m. at dinner?
On vacation.
On vacation.
You know my testimony.
I do.
Don't come on a date talking about no pastors and sermons and child. Anyway.
If you don't get that, right, we don't want this. We don't want this.
So, Alise, can you tell us about what are some suggested mental health supports we can have in the church organization for pastors?
Absolutely. So this is the thing. Pastors, understandably so, are some of the most prideful people in the world, and they shy away from getting the help they need because they don't want people in their city to know the things that they're actually battling with.
Yeah.
Get beside your pride. Lay aside your pride and get some help. It is our job to keep you and your business confidential. You are safe. And there are so many different platforms that you can go, that you can seek out, look at to find therapists in your area. Look for Christian therapists. Yeah. Actually, I know a lot of pastors who would prefer not to have a Christian therapist, and that is totally okay.
Me too.
And that's totally okay. You're not a heathen if you don't want a Christian-based therapist. That is totally fine. But find somebody, get outside of your comfort zone and do what you got to do.
So how can we as a people, the congregants, in terms of getting pastors connected to therapists? Because I'm just thinking of my pastor.
Yeah.
Who's in his 60s.
Yes.
Right? So he might not be on Psychology Today or whatever. What do you suggest for us who have pastors who might not be as willing to kind of go out there to find a therapist?
I'm going to be very honest. I helped a pastor who was in their 60s find one. They were not the most savvy, like you said. I went on Psychology Today and asked them, I said, okay, what are you looking for? How can I support you?
I love that.
And so as a congregation, actually ask your pastor these questions.
I love that.
Don't be uncomfortable.
Okay. So Elise, how can we keep up with everything that you're doing? Because like I need more. I need more of Elise because the way you was just like talking today, I need you to give us more.
Absolutely. So you can follow me on Instagram at officially Alise, and that is Alise, Alise. And there's going to be some things coming this year, some more conversations, some very candid conversations, especially about mental health and the Black church, Black ministry families in general.
I love that. And you have music, right?
I do.
Yes.
It is on iTunes. You can just look up Alise, and you'll find a couple of things there.
Amazing. Ladies and gentlemen, Elise, the singing therapist. Make sure that you guys check her out on all her social media networks. And be sure to tune in next week to the Paging Dr. Shonda Show. See y'all.
The doctor in front of your name.